From campus life to real life, Campus Gal Radio. The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of this station. Content is for informational purposes only and should not be considered specific advice. The station is not responsible for the accuracy of guest statements.
Let's start with personal finance. Remember, it's not a subject that you need to pass an exam per se, but it's something you need day to day to manage your life and achieve your goals. Hi, I'm Hansi, and we are learning to be money mindful. Let's go in and get started. Personal finance. We all need money, right? To exchange our excess labor into products and services. That's the easy part. But we also need money to be able to buy big things that we can't afford straight away from our monthly income. For example, we want to buy a house or we want to buy a college education. So we need to be able to save up and invest and accumulate enough to be able to buy those things. But we also sometimes need things that we fund from our future income. So for example, we want to buy a house or a college education that we know that we will actually earn extra return in the future. So we can kind of borrow from future earnings and finance that investment today. So that's borrowing. We also need money to be able to pay for things that are unforeseen, and therefore by definition we can't plan for them. So an accident or a disease or a pandemic or a job loss, things like that, we just can't plan for them. So we can buy insurance for it. So all of these areas form part of finance or money, and because they affect our personal lives, we call them personal finance. Now, before we move on too much, I need to explain why finance is so confusing. It's really because finance is not like other sciences. It's not like physics, where there are laws where everyone agrees upon. In finance, actually, it's a social science. And we're studying human behavior. So there are definitely differences of opinion. And that is opinion. But also, there are concepts that I may explain something very differently to somebody else. And then there are facts. But in finance, even facts like what is an asset class, actually people do disagree on. It's more like a concept rather than a fact. But things like what is an equity or what is a debt, people do agree upon. So you need to learn to distinguish between facts, concepts, and opinions. So I will try and point these out to you as we go along, and you need to learn to decipher this over time. It's like, remember in school, you learned how to read first, and then you had textbooks that were by topic, and then they progressively made things harder and harder. Now imagine, instead of doing that way, teachers just threw information at you randomly. You wouldn't have learned much, right? Like that, the reason we're doing this series is so that you can learn to read, understand the language of money, understand the concepts, and then you can distinguish between a good opinion or a bad opinion, or things that agree with you or they don't. So remember, you do have to learn the frameworks. Now, when you look at newspapers, you see sections like general, political, companies or business, industry, and then one title called personal finance. And under that, you find this laundry list of things like insurance, taxes, mutual funds, equities, real estate. Remember, it's actually easier to group things into 3 or 4 things. And let's talk about what those are. So the first thing is how you earn money, right? This is usually from your profession or your service or job or business or things like that. Then you need to manage, which is basically how much you spend and in what categories, and then how much you save. Okay, and how to keep on top of that. You could call it managing, you could call it budgeting, you could call it spending and saving. Third is you need to grow your money. The savings that you put in step 2, you need to be able to grow that to meet your goals in the long term. And then fourth, you need to be able to protect yourself and your money and your assets and your loved ones and so on. So you do need to protect. So they're basically the 4 areas that you need to focus on. Now, when you look at those newspapers or websites that I mentioned, if you really pay attention, all their headings like real estate and mutual funds and equities are actually different ways of investing. So it could be grouped under grow or invest. Same thing with taxes. It's basically how to save tax, right? So maybe it could go under manage. So basically you could take that laundry list and group them into 3 or 4 things. Notice also that I actually like grouping things into 3 or 4 things. So when you group information into 3 or 4 things, maximum, you're able to retain that and therefore understand it better. Now let's go back to each of the buckets that I mentioned earlier. Starting with earn. As I said earlier, technically earning money is up to you. Personal finance websites don't tend to help in earning money. So we will leave this topic for now and make a separate video on how to think about earning. In the meantime, there is one on the MoneyHen's website on this. Spend and save or manage. One of the key aspects of personal finance is to be able to manage your spending so that you pay all your bills and are able to save some money. If all the income expenses came at the same time, it would be easier. But in reality, some people get paid daily or weekly and fortnightly or monthly. There is a timing mismatch. So we need to somehow track all the money coming in and then how much needs to get paid and when and so on. To manage all of this, people make budgets. Budgeting basically means that we make a list of all our expenses under big headings like food and transport and utilities and things like that, and we allocate a percentage to it so that we tell our money where to go. Now, if we don't do that and you think you can just do this on the fly and you're able to save some, that's fine. But people who struggle with it end up just putting out fires, and then at the end of the year they say, where did the money all go? So to manage all that, you do need to make a budget so that you can tell your money where to go. Anything that is short term we call expenses. Anything that is long term we call goals. We include both of these in our budgeting list so that we can allocate our money to each of these. And if we can't allocate an amount to everything, we have to make trade-offs. Some expenses are more important than others. Some are more urgent than others. So we need to think about expenses and goals in both these dimensions, in terms of importance and in terms of urgency. In terms of importance, we could call them needs, wants, and desires. In terms of time frames, we can call them short-term, medium-term, and long-term. We will make another more detailed video on goal planning and also on budgeting, but right now it's important that you do need to make trade-offs consciously or subconsciously. It's better to make it consciously, ideally in written form and in discussion with your family so that everyone is on the same page. If we don't do this, this money goes anyway, and then we ask, where did the money go? And then we have to find where it went and then figure it all out. Apart from wasting time to solve this mystery, there is a risk that we forget some big thing, like insurance, when the bill comes annually. So budgeting is a key aspect of personal finance. Let's talk about protect. Now let's turn to another key aspect, which is being able to handle unforeseen circumstances. By definition, these are unforeseen and therefore they cannot be planned in advance or explicitly in the budgeting process. We don't know when they will happen and how much they will cost. We don't know how much disruption they will cause. Now, these disruptions could be medical, like an accident or a disease, either yourself or a family member. It could be things breaking, either something in the house or in the car, which are expensive to fix. By definition, they're unforeseen, which means there could be a downturn in the income. Either whether you're salaried, you could lose your job, or if you're in business, it could be just a business downturn. Disruptions to these three things, our income, our health, and our assets, can happen sometime in our lives. In fact, it's not if, it's when. And if it doesn't happen to us, it could happen to one of our family members, someone we love. So either way, it's not helpful to rely on luck. We should plan for these. There could also be an instant and significant change in the economic environment, such as we've all experienced recently, a pandemic and a war. These can cause shutdowns or extreme inflation. These are also very hard to plan for, but at least mentally, we now know what to think about. Grow. As we said at the start of this video, the main reason we need to look at personal finance is that because we have a timing mismatch. In a typical 80-year life, we expect to live with our parents for the first 20 and then work for 40 years, and then we spend another 20 odd years in retirement where we don't earn. So we need to pay for an 80-year life while working only 40. So we need to save, but we also need to make the savings grow. The way to grow is through investment. Investing is when we earn a return on our money. We can invest in different asset classes and in products. Asset classes are categories where the underlying securities that we invest in are very similar. So equities, where there's sort of stocks of individual companies, or there is bonds that basically could be central government bonds, state government bonds, or corporate bonds. Products, on the other hand, are legal structures or wrappers around the asset class that may change the risk and return from that asset class. So for example, when you invest in a fixed term deposit, the bank invests in bonds, but and that may lead to profit, but the bank absorbs all the ups and downs and promises you a smoother return. You don't see where they're invested in, and neither should you care. Similarly, insurance companies also smooth out the returns. On the other hand, mutual funds are look-through products. They are not smoothing out. They basically show you what securities you're invested in, and you get all the ups and downs from the underlying securities. So you need to understand both asset classes and products. In a future video, we'll go into much more detail. There you go. It wasn't that hard, was it? And not boring. So here's the thing. You don't have to spend hours and hours watching videos or reading books. A little bit of common sense and we are sorted. We just need a few minutes of mindful attention to learn the basics. See you in the next episode.
Campus Girl Radio, every hour, let it roll. Campus Girl Radio. Thumb on the glass, I scroll too fast. Your
在拍